Attention. This is a lockdown. Locks, lights, out of sight. I repeat, this is a lockdown.
I was a junior in high school when it happened. Our school had lockdown drills almost every month, so when the announcement came over the intercom, nobody reacted right away. Lockdown, this is not a drill. Teachers, secure your classrooms immediately. Our teacher's face changed instantly. She jumped up, locked the door, turned off the lights, covered the small window on the door, and whispered for everyone to get into the storage room behind the classroom. There were 26 of us packed into a space that was barely large enough for half that many. Nobody talked. The only sounds were people trying to slow their breathing and the occasional vibration of someone's phone. About 30 seconds later, someone started pounding on our classroom door. Not violently, just 3 calm knocks, then another 3. Our teacher slowly looked through the tiny gap in the window covering. "I don't see anyone," she whispered. The knocking stopped. A few seconds later, we heard running in the hallway, then silence. We thought whoever it was had left. A minute later, the door suddenly opened. Every heart in that room nearly stopped. Another teacher from across the hall quickly pushed a student inside before locking the door again. "He was trapped in the hallway," she whispered before running back to her own classroom. The boy looked about our age. Gray hoodie, black backpack, baseball cap pulled low. He looked terrified. Without saying a word, he walked into the storage room and sat against the far wall. Nobody questioned it. During a lockdown, students sometimes ended up in the wrong classroom. It wasn't unusual. At least, that's what we all believed. For the next 20 minutes, nobody spoke. Outside, we could hear police sirens getting closer, then officers shouting somewhere in the building. Every sound echoed through the hallway. The new kid never moved. He never looked at his phone, never whispered, never cried. He just watched us. Not all of us, one at a time. His eyes slowly moved from face to face like he was memorizing everyone in the room. I tried convincing myself he was just scared, but something felt wrong. Then I noticed something. He wasn't wearing a school ID. Everyone in our district was required to wear one. Teachers reminded us every single morning. He didn't have one. I leaned over and quietly asked my friend Ethan if he knew him. He barely moved his head. No. I asked another girl, same answer. Then another. Nobody recognized him. My stomach dropped. I looked at our teacher. She was staring at him now too. She must have noticed the same thing. For a second, it looked like she wanted to ask who he was, but she stopped herself. If he was dangerous, confronting him inside a dark storage room with 26 students trapped beside him could be the worst decision she could make. So she stayed quiet. Everyone stayed quiet. Minutes passed. The silence became unbearable. Then, he smiled. Just for a second. Not because anyone said something, not because anything happened. He simply smiled while looking toward the classroom door. A slow, almost satisfied smile. That's when I felt real fear. Not panic, fear. I remember thinking, he knows something we don't. Suddenly, he reached into his backpack. Every person in that room froze. One girl covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Our teacher slowly stepped in front of us. The stranger looked at everyone, then slowly pulled out a bottle of water. He took one drink, put it back, and kept staring toward the door. Nobody breathed. Another 15 minutes passed. Then we heard heavy boots outside. Police. Real police. They announced they would clear classrooms one at a time. Our teacher finally unlocked the storage room. Officers entered with rifles raised. One officer counted everyone, then frowned. "Hold on." He counted again. "Who's that?" He pointed directly at the boy. Our teacher answered immediately. "I thought he came from another classroom." The officer looked around. "Does anyone know him?" 26 students looked at each other. Not one hand went up. The officer's expression changed instantly. "Stand up." The boy didn't move. Another officer grabbed him by the arm and pulled him into the hallway. The moment he disappeared, every student started talking at once. Nobody knew his name. Nobody had ever seen him before. About 30 minutes later, detectives interviewed each of us separately. That's when we learned the truth. The boy wasn't a student. He wasn't a transfer. He wasn't even enrolled in the district. According to investigators, he had walked into the school through an unsecured side entrance just minutes before the lockdown began. In the chaos, another teacher had assumed he was a student caught in the hallway, and unknowingly placed him in the safest room she could find. Police searched his backpack after taking him into custody. Inside, they found food, a change of clothes, a notebook filled with hand-drawn maps of the school, and a class schedule that didn't belong to him. To this day, nobody knows why he was there. Maybe he planned to steal something. Maybe he was hiding from the police. Or maybe he had come to that school looking for someone. What I do know is that for nearly an hour, 26 students sat shoulder to shoulder with a complete stranger. And if the police hadn't counted one extra person, he probably would have walked out of the building with the rest of us, without anyone ever realizing he never belonged there. If you've ever been through a real school lockdown, you'll know the weirdest part isn't when it starts, it's the waiting. You just sit there wondering if it's over, or if something terrible is about to happen. I found that out during my senior year. It was a Friday and nobody was really paying attention in class. Spring break started the following week, so everyone was talking instead of working. I remember my teacher had just told us to put our phones away when the announcement came over the intercom. "Teachers, initiate lockdown procedures immediately. This is not a drill." The room went completely silent. Nobody laughed. Nobody asked questions. Our teacher locked the door, shut off the lights, covered the little window on the door, and told us to get into the corner behind a row of filing cabinets. We'd done plenty of lockdown drills before, but something about her face told me this one was different. For the first 15 minutes, nobody said a word. I texted my mom, "I think it's real this time." She replied almost instantly, "I love you, stay hidden." I still have that message. Every now and then we'd hear people running in the hallway, then police radios, then complete silence again. It felt like time had completely stopped. After about 40 minutes, things started sounding different. Instead of yelling, we heard conversations, doors opening, teachers talking to officers. Someone farther down the hall actually laughed. One of my friends whispered, "I think it's over." Honestly, I thought so too. A few minutes later, an officer knocked on our classroom door. Our teacher opened it just enough to talk to him. He told us they were clearing the building one classroom at a time. He said we'd probably be leaving soon. The second he walked away, everyone relaxed. People started stretching. Someone grabbed their backpack. A girl next to me called her dad and quietly said, "They found him." That was the first time I'd taken a full breath in almost an hour. Then, something hit the ceiling. Not hard, just thunk. Everybody looked up. Nobody said anything. A few seconds later, thunk. This time it sounded closer. My friend looked at me and whispered, "What was that?" I shrugged. I figured maybe it was someone on the roof. Then we heard it again. Except this time, it wasn't just one sound. It sounded like someone crawling, slowly, right above us. You could actually hear the ceiling tiles creaking. At first, nobody moved. We were all just staring up. Then little pieces of white dust started falling onto the floor, right in the middle of the classroom. Our teacher noticed it too. She slowly backed away from that spot without saying a word. The crawling stopped. Everything was quiet again. I remember thinking, maybe we imagined it. Then one of the ceiling tiles dipped down, just a little, like somebody had put their weight on it. Everyone froze. The tile slowly bent, then popped back into place. That's when somebody screamed. Our teacher slammed the classroom door shut again and yelled for everyone to get back into the corner. Almost immediately, we heard officers running down the hallway. Then someone outside shouted, "He's still inside!" I've never heard panic in a police officer's voice before. I hope I never hear it again. The crawling started again, only this time it was faster. It moved across our classroom, then into the room next door. We could hear ceiling tiles cracking all the way down the hallway. Police were yelling directions to each other. Someone kept shouting, "Don't let him get to the stairwell." Then, nothing. The silence lasted maybe 2 minutes. It felt like 20. Eventually, officers came back and evacuated us through an emergency exit. As we were running across the parking lot, I looked back at the school. There were police climbing onto the roof. Others were dragging long ladders toward the side of the building. Nobody told us what happened until later that night. According to the police, while everyone was focused on searching classrooms, the suspect had climbed into the maintenance space above the ceiling through an unlocked access hatch inside a janitor's closet. He'd been crawling over classrooms the entire time. The first search completely missed him. The part that still gets me is that we were seconds away from walking out of that classroom. If that noise hadn't made us look up, our teacher probably would have opened the door, and whoever was crawling above us would have been waiting just a few feet away. Even now, whenever I hear a ceiling creak in a quiet room, I still catch myself looking up before I look at the door. I've never told this story online before, mostly because I still don't know what would have happened if our teacher hadn't been running 5 minutes late that morning. It was just another Tuesday. I got to school around 7:40. Nothing felt unusual. I met up with a couple friends by the vending machines before first period, and we were joking about a math test none of us had studied for. Our first class was English. The only reason I remember that is because our teacher was never late, not once. She was always standing outside her classroom before the first bell. That morning, she wasn't there. The classroom was still locked. About 15 of us were standing in the hallway waiting for her. People were on their phones. Somebody was throwing a paper ball into the trash can. It was completely normal. A minute later, she came jogging down the hallway carrying a stack of papers. She apologized and unlocked the room. We all walked in. Less than 3 minutes later, the lockdown announcement came over the intercom. Nobody understood what was happening. Our teacher locked the door, turned off the lights, and told us to get into the corner. I remember thinking, that was weird timing. For almost an hour we stayed there. Nobody knew anything. Parents were texting. Rumors were everywhere. Some people thought there was a shooter. Others thought someone had brought a knife. Nobody knew what was actually happening. Eventually, officers escorted us outside. We spent the rest of the day at another building while detectives searched the school. Classes were canceled for the rest of the week. That night, the news finally explained what happened. A former student had entered the school carrying a rifle. Police stopped him before he reached the second floor. Everyone called it a miracle. But the part that wasn't reported until weeks later was what detectives found in his backpack. There was a notebook. Inside were hand-drawn maps of the school, teachers' names, class schedules, even photos of certain hallways. Most of it was disturbing, but one page stood out. At the top, written in black marker, was the number of our classroom. Not the teacher's name, not the subject, just the room number. Underneath it, a list of times: 7:45, 7:47, 7:50. Investigators later determined he'd been watching the school for weeks. He knew exactly when students entered each classroom every morning. He had planned to reach our room while everyone was still standing in the hallway, waiting for class to begin. The only reason none of us were there was because our teacher had gotten stuck behind a train crossing on her way to school. She arrived just a few minutes late. Just enough time for all of us to already be inside with the door locked when the lockdown started. I've thought about that more times than I can count. If that train had passed a little sooner, if she had arrived on time, 15 of us would have still been standing in that hallway, completely exposed. People always ask me if I believe in luck. I don't know. But I do know this. Every time I hear someone complain because a teacher is running late, I think about that morning, and how being 5 minutes behind schedule might have been the only reason I'm still alive.